hear your expression.
This is the Nana Yaya Show. Hello there. Welcome, Owen Russell. Welcome, my number one coach to the Nana Yaya Show.
Oh my God. It's high praise.
Yeah. Hey, no. I have to, salute. If you were here, I'll be greeting you like this. to have such wisdom, an elder with such wisdom on my show, I am honored, I am grateful, and I'm highly privileged to have you here. I respect you a ton and a ton and a ton I cannot even carry. You see, my head is small, so it cannot carry. Welcome to the show.
It's delighted to be here. And yeah, that's a lot of high praise. I'm not sure I can live up to that kind of hype. But but
actually, you have overlived it. That is why you are here.
Thank you so very much. It's so terrific to be here and just to continue conversations with people who look like me. It's just really wonderful. Before we got live, we were talking about being descendants of Africans here in North America, and looking back at our traditions and where we came from, who we are, and what that actually means to us. And there's just so much to learn from, I think, our traditional ways and how I think what we know actually lives in our hearts. Mm-hmm. And what has continued to be there, maybe layered over in some ways by other cultures, other approaches, other belief systems. Mm-hmm. But in fact, it is that which has always been present within us. Yeah, and it's that thing that we hear that says, over here, and we need to start turning and looking. It's like, oh, okay, okay, that makes sense.
That is wisdom.
Let's do that. Right.
So, guys, we do a quick introduction. Eric Owen Russell is a coach, a mentor, a behavioral. What is the other word?
Organizational behavioralist.
That word not been for my mouth. Organizational behavioralist and crisis interventionist. Right? Okay. So he's done a lot of work with individuals, trying to get us on our best and stay in the best, like what the title of this show says, how to get ahead and stay in the lead with Eric Owen Russell. That is what he does best. And he's packed with wisdom that when I listen to him, it's like, oh, my heart is just, overfilled with joy. So if I am overexcited, pardon me, but really, it is just that energy, that spirit that flows from him that gets me, all the juices going. So thank you. So we'll start with, how did you become this man we are going to listen today? What is your origin story?
Oh, it's a terrific question. I think there's so many ways that can be presented, but if I was to kind of distill it down, it would be sort of forged in the furnace of a lot of challenges and opportunities to life. So I'm one of 7 children. Grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
My parents are both first college educated people in their family, and they have done some amazing things with their lives, and they raised their 7 kids to try and follow in their footsteps. I have 5 sisters, 1 brother, and I'm the third of 7.
Math, right?
Third of 7 kids. But I always look back at my life and I think about the things that have really helped to shape me, and they have been largely through a lot of the difficult passages of life that I've experienced. I had a lot of challenges growing up, from difficulty in school in terms of learning, I always describe myself as an other learner. I was
Mm-hmm.
not good in classroom settings. I just did not understand what went on often. And I spent a lot of time. I used to describe my school day this way in high school. I get up in the morning, I'd go to school, I'd stay in school and do all my classes. As soon as classes were over, I would get some tutoring with all of my
Yeah.
teachers. Didn't matter what it was, I got tutored. And then I went and did sports and went home and tried to do homework, which I didn't really understand. Then I go back to school, try and figure out what was going on in the classroom, etc. So there was a lot of that for me. So I always say to people who are struggling in school, sometimes the way that school works and the way that we teach kids today isn't necessarily the way that we all learn. So ask your teachers a
Yes.
lot of questions. And that was the one thing that I took out of school was asking my teachers a
As.
lot of questions because they eventually caught on that this kid
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get it the way everybody else is, but he
Yes.
wants to
Yes.
learn, so let's help him. So I went through a lot of those things like that in growing up, both real sort of abuse at home, just got picked on at school and bullied and all that sort of thing. But my parents were very, very, very positive, very optimistic about the things that we
Mm-hmm.
could do. So
Mm-hmm.
fast forward through life, I've traversed a lot of other difficulties and hardships in my life experience. And I think a lot of those things have really shaped the person that I am today.
Mm-hmm.
I'll quote Tony Robbins, who says, I wouldn't be the man I was today if it wasn't for the mother I had. And he grew
Yeah.
up with a very, very difficult mother, a very, very troubled home situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be the person I am today were it not for the difficult challenges that I've experienced in the past. But I will say this, which is that I also wouldn't be the person I am today if it weren't for an understanding of the people I come from. And it's not just my
Mm-hmm.
parents and my family, but going back to my ancestry and my ancestors, because I'm a descendant of enslaved Africans here in the US, and just really developing an understanding as to who I come from because they inform who I am today. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that does that help to answer the question?
No, it does. It does. It does help a lot. Yeah. But with your background that you saying,
Mm-hmm.
from where I sit, you are a marvelous human being.
Oh,
And when it comes to teen, I've had quite a bit of experience with, clinical instruction, which is nursing students. I pick up on the differences, and I do what I do is do the research, come and teach me. Let's talk.
mm-hmm.
So there's no hard whatnot. We're having a conversation, we're telling stories, and then we're learning, or they learn through that mode, which helps them, it
Right.
sticks much better. Yes, yes.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
with what you're telling me, some people go through all these challenges and end up not being like the people you or Tony Robbins or any other people that have transcended. What is that factor, that deciding factor?
For me, I love learning and I'm really curious. So I'm
Mm,
always trying to figure out how things work, why things work the way they do. I'm always asking questions, trying to find out, well, what can I learn from you? We had a great conversation before we went
yes,
live. It's like you're like, okay, tell me more,
yes,
because I want to learn. So I
yes.
think that uh, you talk about wisdom. I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine. I don't think it's necessarily wisdom. I just think it's accumulation of knowledge. You just keep asking. You just keep asking. You just
Which is
accumulate.
equal to wisdom.
Okay, okay,
Accumulation of experiences,
yeah,
knowledge
yeah.
equals to wisdom.
Yeah. So yes. So we have this immense capacity to learn things, and learning
Mm-hmm,
is so important. We have to
mm-hmm,
always be wanting to learn because that's really
mm-hmm.
critical. Because that's the one capacity I always talk about. This, the one superpower that humans have is the ability to learn. If you can learn, you can get out of any situation. You can deal with anything. But it's often our failure to learn that prevents us from really being able to advance and move forward in life. So,
Yeah.
so like when you run into a difficult or a hard spot, a tough place in life, you're there to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You're there to learn because you're going to learn some things in there, especially about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that only the difficulty and the hardship are able to show you.
Mm-hmm.
And our job there is to figure that out. What are we supposed to learn in this situation? So it's one of the things that I think was important about my life growing up is that eventually, after you get knocked around enough times in life, you think, oh, I should probably learn a couple of things here. So you just really start to learn. So I think
Yeah.
that where a lot of this comes from is just the fact that we get curious and we want to learn and we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Yeah.
So we learn.
Okay. Great. 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 Um. So, but when you're talking about you gotta learn. Like when we had this conversation in the background, and I was telling you about my experience,
Mm-hmm.
they are these group of people are in an institution to learn,
Mm-hmm.
but but I observe, I listen, and it's like, how can they cope outside? Because the same thing that have been taught, they will ask the same question again. So I don't think there was learning.
Mm-hmm.
How does mindset play a role in all this?
Mm-hmm. That's a terrific question. So, and this is for students out there. Okay, so if you're a student and you're a learner, and as a student, college, high school, doesn't matter, graduate school, your job right now is to learn, but it's a lifetime job. We'll always have to learn. So here's the process. Here's what we need to remember. Um, Students often focus on getting good grades. Getting good grades is not what we should be focused on, but it's the process that takes us to the good grades, which is the learning process. So here's what's critical. I got an iPhone sitting here. Okay. This iPhone is an end result of a lot of learning. That iPhone didn't come about overnight, but there was a lot of learning that went in, and learning is called failure. Failure is when we don't get to the expected result. That's not failure. We often look at it as failure. It's learning. It's learning that what we tried to do didn't get to the result that we wanted, but we learned from that we need to go in a different direction. So that's what learning is. Learning, and for students, they're always thinking about I need to get a good grade. I need to get a good grade. No, you need to learn. All the grade is a reflection of what you've learned. That's all it is. So the focus is on what did I learn? What do I now know?
Mm-hmm.
And that only comes from what did I get wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we have to begin the process of understanding it. The job isn't to get it right. The job is to learn through life, and it will end up right.
Mm-hmm.
But it only ends up right after you have failed, and that's what an experiment is called. Experiment's called failure. So you fail over and over and over and over and over again in order to be able to get it right. So here's a perfect example that many people have used this. If you watch, all of us adults walk.
Yeah.
Humans walk upright.
Yeah.
Humans don't crawl.
Yeah.
That's because every human first crawled
Oh,
and learned
how to
how to
walk.
walk upright on our feet. None of us as humans, as we learned how to walk, got up and walked. We
Yes.
crawled, we fell, we got
We
it right,
cried.
we cried, all of those things happened, but we learned.
Mm-hmm.
So the emphasis is on
The
figuring
process
it out.
out. Yeah.
That's what we have to do. And that's a skill set we have to develop is figuring it out. And that's curiosity. That's about, okay, this didn't work. What do I need to know to be able to make it work? And we need to be able to ask questions in order to do that. Questions are a really important part of living life. So for students, for people, for all of us as humans,
Mm.
it's not a matter of thinking that we have arrived. That's fine. But what is there left to learn? And we'll
Mm-hmm.
always ask the questions, what am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to know? Really, really, really important questions. What am I missing? What do I need to know? really critical questions for us to be able to live life well. Because we're always going to be missing something. There's always something we need to learn. There's always something we need to know. No, we're doing this podcast right now.
Yeah.
I'm in my mind, I'm taking mental notes. Like, what do I need to know about this? What am I learning? What is Nana teaching
I,
me? I need to
I'm,
learn.
I'm, I'm writing my notes, and as you're talking, things are just going on in my head. It's like you just spoke a reflective reflection of me when I was a young, let's say if there was a class of 30, I was second from the bottom.
I was the one who was the bottom.
And high school, like I went to high school, and I I think my brains work, in a warped sense of way. I went to high school going to do literature, with the hope of going to do journalism, and I jumped into science.
Mhm.
I did physics, chemistry, biology, which were not really my loves. So you actually disturbing my brains when you tell me to study. So studying was very difficult.
Mhm.
But you give me agriculture. I loved agriculture. I was an A student in agri. Give me literature. So in my science classes, I used to do a lot of reading. So I'm reading something, a novel, not what the teacher is saying. That is, beyond. It's not even my concern. But fast forward, being at this age that I am, and I reflect back and look at all those of us who went to school, and 2020, we all met 25 years post, high school. And you look at the trajectory of people's life, and it's like, girl, you did good because I didn't stay in one place. As you say, learning. What I managed to do is combine my nursing and storytelling
Mhm.
in patients and in teaching. So therefore, when I come to you and I'm standing there, now one, I'm laughing because I'm going to tell some jokes, comedy. Number two, by the time I finish having a conversation with you, your anxiety is gone down.
Mhm.
Number three, too many people like to, where's Bernadette? I've had enough. But I reflect back and look at my beginnings, and those that were, A students and whatnot, where are they?
Yeah.
They stuck in track jobs.
Right.
And because I never fitted into one place, as you say, I learned this and I learned this, and I read a lot outside my
Mhm.
nursing and in nursing, and see how I can fit them both into the how do we call it, the profession
Mhm.
in teaching. So it's kind of that learning has me become a more rounded person. So thank you for hitting that on. And that's what I say. Being at the bottom does not mean you be at the bottom in life. It's dependent on you, the individual, to make learning a habit.
Yes. And you just hit upon something that was really important, which goes back to the original one of the original questions you asked,
Hmm.
which was how did I get to be the person that I actually
Yeah.
am? Well, you used the word individual and you talked about being the second from the bottom.
Hmm.
It's a curious place to be because I've often looked at that reality for me in being outside,
Yeah.
being at the bottom,
Hmm.
having to look in
Hmm.
and not being included, which is also part of my growing up. I wasn't a popular kid. I was not
Hmm.
included. I didn't get invited. And I grew up a lot on the outside of things. But what was fascinating about that, and important about that, was I learned how to appreciate myself
Hmm.
and that I'm not like everyone else,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And therefore,
Yes,
and,
yes,
and
yes.
therefore, I grew up without feeling the necessity
Hmm.
of being like everybody else
Hmm.
and learn to appreciate and value the person that I am, that I was. And I look around today and I see so many people that are carbon copies of one another. There is not a sense of my own person and who I therefore am in relationship to others as we fit together rather than we are copies of one another. And as one wise person once said when I was working in the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
the saying went like this: if you have a yes man reporting to you, then one of you is redundant.
Yeah.
Copies of each other become unnecessary. But
Mm-hmm.
individuals, and we can truly be who we actually are, that's precious because
Mm-hmm.
we all need each other and what makes us unique to fit in
Mm-hmm.
and form the fabric of the whole thing. So I would really encourage people, and it's one of the things I've seen in terms of working with clients, is that, and working with people, is that you have a chance to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Find that person. That's what you did.
Yeah.
Find yourself. Be
Mm-hmm.
yourself. It's
Yeah.
so critically important that we do that.
Yeah. And it is very critically important, but also this is one thing where you say that it's like, okay, if the person doesn't know, because
Mhm.
what I realize is that awareness is a big thing. If they don't know, how do they go about it?
Mm. If I don't know who I am, how do I find out
How do I
who I?
find out me?
I would simply suggest this. I don't think people are not aware of who they are. They've just forgotten who they
Yeah.
are. And so there's an interesting exercise that I work sometimes with clients with, and that is go back. If you have siblings, ask them who you were as a little child. See if they can help you remember the person that you were. If you've got those siblings, if there are other adults, parents in your lives,
Mm-hmm.
ask your parents who were you when you were little, because there is always a germ, a seed in your little life when you're a little person that never goes away, that will always be
Eh,
your adult existence, that you need to hearken back to and find and recover who that person is. Because that person's there. We might layer them over, but they're still there. And we need this process of pulling that off, pulling it off, pulling it off, till you get down to the cert seed, the germ of who you actually originally were. So I'm not sure that we've forgotten that, not sure we've lost who we are. We may have forgotten or misplaced who we actually are. And that just needs
wow.
to be recovered.
No, you say this, and I don't know. You bring in so many, how do we call it, memories. My mom, my mother, comfort of blessed memory, used to call me Bernadette. So Bernadette is my colonized name. She used to call me Teacher Bernadette. I said no, I would never be a teacher because my view of teachers in Ghana, mm-mm, they were mean. They beat you up, that capital punishment thing. So I didn't like many of my teachers and I didn't like the way things were taught. So I would never be a teacher. But I'm now almost 46 years old sitting here and I've got you're talking and it's like, oh wow. What she used to say is what I am doing now. And as one man pointed out, do you think the interviews you do is not teaching? That is also teaching. It's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. So thank you. Thank you for
Oh, you're
validating this.
you're absolutely welcome. I think that for me, some of my most I talked about being a curious person. Some of my
Mm-hmm.
most precious memories growing up as a little one was riding my bike around through the woods and the forest near my house,
Mm-hmm.
and just curious. I was looking at everything and just taking it all in because
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot we can learn about the germ of who we are
Mm-hmm.
from asking those who are older than us what we were like when we were smaller,
Yeah.
and that will help us to recapture that.
Mm-hmm.
Really
Okay.
important.
Beautiful. I think I helped some of us course correct.
Mm, mm, yeah.
course correcting our lives.
Yeah,
Wow.
very, very, very true. And I'll just make one other comment about that. And one of the things that I think is most important we try and find a way back to is we find a way back to the fact that we are loved,
Mm-hmm.
and that one of the most important things I think is true for all of us is that we want to be loved as is. And
Okay.
that is one of the most, I think it's one of our central human drives is to be loved as is.
Yes.
Um, and we want to
Wow.
find a way back to that.
Wow. That
Mm.
is heavy. In this world with a whole lot of unsavory wars and whatnots and religious, differences, and sometimes that becomes, and racial, disparities and whatnots. Love becomes difficult, so to
Yeah.
speak, for some people. Love become difficult for some people. For me, I don't see that as a problem, as a problem, because I'll tell you as it is, whether blue, black, or green.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, you die, I die. You are birth, I'm birth. So I've bagged, as I told somebody, I've bagged and tagged people of different races. I don't care. Number one, you are human. So in my books and in my practice, I go by the, do unto others as you want others to do unto you.
Mm.
I say, even if I don't pick up the Bible, ask for that one, and ask, seek, and knock. Those are my two.
They're good ones. They're good ones to live by.
Those are the two that I live by. And my
Yeah.
life is very simple. And throughout the stress, what can I do? If I stress, I will die. If I don't stress, I will die. What is the quality of life I want? I want a stress-free quality of life. If I die, I'm gone. But
Mm.
I'm not going to stress to death. No, I refuse. I reject it.
Good. It's good.
Oh goodness. So let me ask you this critical question for me. What brought you into coaching, into mentorship, crisis interventionist, all these, key things our generation we need it like crazy?
Mm. What got me involved in, okay, I want to try and weave a couple of stories together.
Okay.
I told you I was very bad at school,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was teachers who took an interest in me that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I learned from that was I wanted to go to college to become a teacher.
I was
And
running, you were going.
I was going, but that didn't work out. So, I did not become a teacher. I became and studied organizational behavior,
Okay.
which is simply human development and growth within
Mm-hmm.
organized systems.
Systems,
We
yeah.
all live in an organized system. A
Yeah.
family is an organized system. Our bodies are organized systems.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs are organized systems. That's all that they are. And it's human growth, how we
Mm-hmm.
develop, how we become, how we are, how we grow within the context of the systems that we find ourselves in. Your neighborhood is a system, your communities are
Yeah.
a system, governments are a system, countries are systems. And it's how
Mm-hmm.
human beings exist, live, thrive, die, whatever, within those systems. So that's what I ended up studying. But here's the interesting part about that was that I didn't become a teacher because what I actually learned was that I loved learning. It's the learning I loved, and it's the helping people learn, which is what I learned about being
Mm-hmm.
in organizational behavior. And it's what I actually learned to love about school was the learning part. And one of the reasons I learned to love that was because when I was in college, I started getting mentoring and coaching by this master coach in college. And I was like, dude, what do you do? This is what you do? Okay, I want to do that too. So, so I took all of the training and all the education that was part of becoming
Mm-hmm.
part of the focus on organizational behavior, which was really focused on that issue of the growth of humans and their development within organized systems, which was really cool and groovy because it laid
Mm-hmm.
the foundation for the work I do in terms of coaching and in mentoring. And this
Mm-hmm.
particular master coach just took me under his wing and said, I will help you grow and develop and become that.
Oh,
So
wow.
he trained me. I used the education that I had, which was really perfectly focused on coaching
Yes.
and mentoring. Absolutely perfectly focused on that because it covers sociology, psychology, religion, just business. All of these things are like matched into what it
Yes.
means to be an organizational behaviorist. So it was a perfect educational background, and then he mentored, guided, and trained me into the work I do in terms of mentoring and coaching. So basically, for me, what got me into it was the work that he did with me.
Mm-hmm.
Also, all of the work that was done in terms of all of my teachers throughout elementary school, high school, and college
Mm-hmm.
in their direct work with me, helping me learn not only the schooling that I needed to learn, but also they poured into me life lessons. I mean, I was
Mm-hmm.
close to all of these teachers as they poured their lives into me. So I really learned this mentoring thing, this coaching thing, this being trained in having people invest in
That's
you,
you. Yes.
in me, which is what they did. So I'm here today because people invested in me
Mm-hmm.
throughout my whole life. So that's not how I got interested in it, but how I learned and how I grew. And throughout the entire process, um, understanding that my passion really is in what people did with me. They
Mm-hmm.
took me
Mm-hmm.
in critical, vulnerable moment of my life
Mm-hmm.
where life was on the line,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, "We'll help you. We'll
Mm-hmm.
get you through this. Just hang
Mm-hmm.
around with us,
Yes.
sit and learn, and we will be there for you to help support you and grow you
Mm-hmm.
and get you through this difficult, hard time,
Wow.
whatever it happens to be." And from that, all of that helped me to become me.
Wow.
And that's how I got involved in mentoring. I learned coaching in that respect, and then I went to coaching school after that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had the educational experience from
Mm-hmm.
being an organizational behavioralist, and all that added into the work I do today and how I am today. Additional work, additional training, additional counseling degrees, and all this sort of
Mm-hmm.
stuff all footed up into me being me. Plus, also just hanging around some wise people. There's nothing like around wise and smart people. Reading a lot. Now,
A
if you
lot.
can't hang around a person who's wise and smart, you can read their book. That
You can.
you can do. You can listen to their podcast. But there are
Yes.
all of
Yes.
these ways that we can grow and develop
Mm-hmm.
as people. But I think the best one really is when we have wise elders
Mm-hmm.
that we can hang around and learn
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really grow and sit at their feet
Yeah.
and understand that they are where they are today because they've traversed a lot of life. There was an
Mm-hmm.
old pastor back when I used to live in Rhode Island, and I remember when I was probably in my early 30s
Mm-hmm.
and just stressing out of as a young father.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him. He was a big man, like 6'6", 6'7"
Yeah.
inches tall. His hands, fingers are like this long.
Oh, wow.
And he looked down at me and he just said, "Eric," he smiled. He goes, "Eric, it's gonna be just fine."
Fine. Yes.
And it was
Yes.
just like, I looked at him and was like, okay,
I
okay.
think.
You said I believe you. You've lived a lot of life,
Mm-hmm.
and okay. And
Yeah.
he just chilled me right out.
Yeah.
It was great.
I think for me, what I tell myself is this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
Right in the midst, it feels like you're in the midst of a hurricane. It comes and it goes. And then the next one, however big, however small, it will come. How do I react? This too shall pass. But the key that I got from your narrative is that you also have to be open to learning because everything is around us. But if you are mentally cluttered or closed off, nothing is going to, you're not going to get the benefit of learning. But if you are open minded, then the teachers, there is a saying about when the student is ready, the teacher will. Ah, when the student is ready, the teacher will, how do you call it, avail or appear, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So,
that's so true. And the one comment I'll make a quick comment
mhm,
about learning, and that is that there are so many opportunities that we have to learn. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Um, if you're in the North, if you're in North America,
mhm,
the U.S. or Canada, even in Europe, we have a cultural emphasis here that is not necessarily on growth and development and becoming better. The narrative is on achieving happiness
yes,
as the most important thing.
yes,
No, no. I can get happy from a pill. I can become happy from a hot shower. I can get happiness from buying something. I can get happiness from drugs. I can get happiness from drink. I can get happiness from so many other ways. I can get happiness. I can have an emotional reaction to life in this moment.
yeah,
That is not a goal to living. A goal to living is to live life well. And living life well means my ability to respond to life as it presents in all of its presentations, good, bad,
mhm,
sad, excited, exhilarated, in all the way that life shows up,
mhm,
to live my life well. That's the goal of my existence here, not to be happy. Because I might be happy one moment, I might be sad the next.
yeah.
And I want to live my life like this. I want to live my
Yes.
life like this. That's how I want to live.
So,
So we live our lives that way, not by pursuing things that, but I'm sorry, we live our lives that way by pursuing things that will
mhm,
be lasting, not pursuing things that will be temporary. And the
yes,
state of happiness is always temporary. But what can I pursue in my life that will be permanent, that will be lasting? I look around at many things and I call them the ancient ones, those that will outlive us.
yeah,
Mountains,
yes,
mountains. You've been to places on Earth like Vancouver. You see those mountains in Canada, Western Canada.
yeah.
You see these mountains that are there. They've been here a long
A
time,
long time, yeah,
a
yeah.
long time. They will
Some of
outlast
these trees,
trees. We have trees in the
yeah,
Pacific Northwest that have been here a long
long time.
time. They will outlast us. So, what do we build into our lives that will outlast us? And it's the legacy of our lives, because
Mhm,
this flesh is
mhm,
temporary. It's going to go. But
mhm,
what is it that we pass on to those who come
mhm,
after us? What is
mhm,
it that has been passed on to us that has been
mhm,
lasting that we can then pass on to others?
mhm,
That is what we strive for in this life. Those are the permanent things. Those are the lasting things. It's not
mhm,
happiness, but it's that gift that we give to the next generation that will help them
mhm.
to live life well. That's what we
So,
pursue
w-
lives.
would you would you say that is sort of a trajectory of having purpose in life?
I'm sorry, say again. The volume it dropped off. Of
Yeah,
having what person life?
a purpose in life.
Yes. Yes. Purpose is important to life. It
Mhm,
really is. But it isn't necessarily the only important part of life. Purpose will help to pull you in an
mhm.
important direction, which is really true. But along with purpose, in terms of things that are important in life, is relationship. In other words, our connection that we have with our fellow humans. That's
Okay.
important, and also in
Mhm,
life, because that is part of life purpose, is how we live in connection and in harmony with others and this world around us. So purpose isn't necessarily just thought of as the thing that I'm doing or how I believe I should be deployed in this life, but it also
mhm.
has to do with how I live this life, which is in part in connection with other humans,
Oh,
in part with
wow.
nature, and in part with this planet. That is also purpose to living. So we've often just defined it as how am I going to be deployed? What am I going to
Mhm.
do? Who am I going to
Yeah.
grow up to be? That's part of it. The other critical part is how am I in relationship to myself, to others, to the world around us. That's critical to purpose too. And also purpose is in terms of legacy. What do I do in terms of legacy? What do I leave behind? And what I leave behind is never buildings. That's who cares.
Mhm,
It's never money that's going to get burned up and used. Who cares?
mhm,
But it is that next person who's coming up after me.
mhm,
What is the influence? What have I left in them?
Yeah.
And that calls into question a lot of important things. How am I living my life?
Yeah.
What are really the values I'm living by? Not the stuff that's going to, not stuff that's not
You
matter.
blowing my mind.
Thank you. But it's how am I investing in others? That's really what matters most to us. And what is the positive impact of that investment to others? That's what I think when I think about purpose. And that's what I think about the permanent things, the lasting things, and
Mhm.
what will be left behind in others.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of my life purpose, but definitely not in terms of how you have, I was thinking about purpose, not life purpose,
Hmm.
but my purpose was actually, going to be within people because I'm just going to share with you this idea that I had in mind last year. It was just bothering me to find one of the countries in on the continent, and because my background is labor and delivery, go do the teaching and everything and deliver babies and do postpartum teaching. What I can do to enhance the lives of women and children. But I recently got in touch with a group through a friend who facilitated everything in Sierra Leone, and I just realized that the thing is bigger than me. It started giving me nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
It's it gives me palpitations because it's like, oh my goodness, it's big. It's big. I didn't see it as big as it was. And
Yeah.
it only became evidence of its big of how big it was when those on the ground started having a conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, Nana, this one is not something small that you do and you leave. It's a lifelong thing that
Mm-hmm.
is going to happen. And its impact is not going to be only today, but tomorrow, tomorrow's next, and future generations coming.
Yeah.
So it kind of made me pause on myself a bit because I need to do a lot of reflection and grounding before I go in and give that part of me too. But thank you for reorienting this purpose and
Mm-hmm.
bring it back to the fore of my how do you call it, to the
Yeah.
fore for me.
Right. And I'm glad that you did. I think that part of the, and one of the things I like about what you said is how your actions will actually have impact on generations to come. And I don't know whether or not in our world today that we, particularly here in the West, why maybe we've lost the sense of the impact that we have on generations to come, except that maybe part of the contributing factors to that is that we live such a long
Long
time.
time. Mm-hmm.
And because we live such a long time, we've lost the sense of the actual real brevity of our existence,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore how necessary it is for us to really focus on the generation to come.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now we're living in such time. Like my father just turned 90 this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's got great grandkids, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if this was 90 years ago, then it's very likely that he might only
Mm-hmm.
maybe see his grandkids, maybe, because of average lifespan around 40 or so, 40
Yeah.
years or so. We didn't live that long. So when you live a long life, 70, 80 years, it really is possible for you to lose sight of the fact that there's a finish line.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. It's very real. And if you lose sight of the finish line, then you lose sight of the work to be done in this time
Ah.
because it's such a long way off that you can just keep putting off and putting off and putting off and putting off. But if
Yeah.
it's short and you understand it's short, then life becomes much more of a priority in this moment and you
Mm-hmm.
realize that the work that you're doing in terms of labor and delivery with
Mm-hmm.
women and girls, how critically important it is, because the next gen, you see in the birth of the child today the next
Mm-hmm.
generation that is coming,
Yeah.
because you realize that this baby is only going to be around for 40 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to come real quick.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
understand how important the survival of this baby is, and the mother,
Mm-hmm.
because their contribution to the next generation is critically important, because the next generation is showing up in a hurry, and it will and
Yeah.
life will be over quickly. So
Mm-hmm.
I wonder sometimes if part of the way we are today is the fact that we've been lulled to sleep by a life that is very long, and therefore we waste a lot of the life that is
Time.
that we have, because we have so much of it to live. But I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you this, which is, I, we say people say in their 20s, I remember I used to be a teenager. That wasn't that long
Oh,
ago.
jeez,
Yeah,
me
we
too.
get to our 30s and we say things like, I remember being in my 20s, because that wasn't that long ago. We get to our 40s and say, do you remember what it was like to be 38 years old? And in our 50s, we still can look back and say, gee, it was 20 years ago or so. I was like in my early 40s and early late 30s or so,
Yeah.
and 10, 15 years ago I was in my early 40s. When you get to be around 60, you know what you're saying? 70, 80, that's not that far off. I'm going to get there in a hurry, right? We stop
Well,
looking back, we start looking forward, because
for,
the end of the road becomes clearly visible to us. And then we think
um,
about how short it is for us to, and what are we going to do over the next 20 years or so that we have healthy life, because we're
yeah.
now looking toward the end of our life. So
Yeah.
sometimes perhaps we simply have lived really long, and because of the length of our life, we've lost sense of the purpose of it, potentially,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't see the importance of what really matters to life, because we
Mm-hmm.
just lived for such a long time. That might be a
Yeah.
contributing factor as to why we might be purposeless in this life, or
Mm-hmm.
just adrift, because we're
No,
not focused
I
on the
yeah.
shortness that we have to live here. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, you say that, and doing a little bit of, nursing in long-term care facilities as well. Then I also realized that the individualistic nature of North America, the nuclear family, and the separation between, families,
Hmm.
because up until recently, depending on which culture you come in from, sometimes you have two or three generations living under the same roof.
Right.
But I find North America, everybody wants their independence. 16, 17 years, children want to move out to go live their lives
Hmm.
and, become independent. It is good, but in the long scheme of things, I also look at it that as a society, we have to look for instance, wisdom such from somewhere else, which in the past, you have the elders sitting around. You always had the support system. You always had the support system. And I was talking about mental health, especially postpartum depression amongst women. And I was explaining the different cultural, instances of, say, in Ghana in the past, when a woman has a baby, the mother or the mother-in-law comes to take care of you for a while till you're okay, and then you go on with your life, or you always have help from a family member because of
Right.
the way the society is. Here, it's me, myself, and daddy, and then
Right.
it goes through your head, and then it's like you crying for help, and nobody really knows what is. Yeah. So that and the long life, and it's just so, if we could drop a little bit and put our lives into focus, and actually, how do we say, relate to people irrespective of their background, because at the end of the day, human beings love other human beings to talk
Right.
to listen to
Right.
hold their hands, to cry on their shoulders. And when those things happen, race and color is not part of the conversation. It's the humanity, the human touch that it is. So if we could look at our lives as human beings, and not that the time you're talking about, right? that will not be here forever. So every time should count. I think many of us will get to the end stage much happier
Mm-hmm.
and purposeful and fulfilled. No, I think much fulfilled, not happier and purposeful, but much fulfilled than, you meet a lot of grumpy, cold people. Man, I did not live that life for you.
Right.
Why are you upset about me?
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with you when you were getting older or
Mm-hmm.
you were living your life.
Mm-hmm.
You set on a course, and that course has ended you here.
Mm-hmm.
So I beg, now me, I'm an immigrant woman. Come here.
There is none of there's so much of that, and I think that is one of the downsides of the individualist culture that we live here in North America, is that we get to the end of our lives and often we are in fact alone because we've never built the
Yes,
sense of community and connection and relationship to each other, because part of our values here are rugged individualism. I got to do it myself.
yes.
um, I often get asked in my work during the time of COVID, you must have been very busy helping people through the difficult and hard time. And I share
Mhm.
with people that not as busy as you might think, because
Thank you.
part of our culture here is I have to do it myself,
Yeah.
and I have to be able to pull myself up by the bootstraps. It's part of the mythology that we live by. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to find my way by myself. And it's like, no, humans. That's not part of our humanity. Part of our humanity, regardless as to how you present on the outside, is
We
that
are
humans
social beings.
humans have, yes, we've always lived in relationship with
Mm-hmm.
each other in a communal, helpful way with each other.
Yeah.
That's part of the genius of our humanity,
Mm-hmm.
is that we live that way. That's part of being developing our individuality, because
Of.
you might need what I have one day, and I might need what you have one day, which is why we can't all grow up alike, because we're going to need each other with what we have. It doesn't mean as I develop my individualism that I live apart. It means that
Yes.
my giftedness, my skills, my abilities are going to be needed by us all, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore we have to be able to grow up in relationship with one another, because we're going to need to work together with each
Mm-hmm.
other. And we need that as an undergirding value, and you often find this in indigenous cultures with indigenous people across the world. One of the great books I read this past year was Sand Talk by Tyson, whose last name I forget. But if your audience has never read it, read that book. It's a great book. Um, Sand Talk, and the author talks in that book about the network of our relationships and why they're so important,
Mm-hmm.
to each other. And this is something that we cannot ever forget, is how important our relationships are to each other, and that we live in community and connection with each other. It's part of the things that I realize. And again, you asked me about my background, my past.
Yes.
My father's father is not his biological father, which is something we found out in our family over the
Yes.
past 5 to 7 years.
Oh,
After doing
wow.
some DNA testing, we realized that we
Yes.
are actually related to another family line in Philadelphia, and that man is actually my biological dad. And what's been interesting about that is this: it's not just a discovery, but it's the realization of why we feel in our family disconnected,
Mm.
because we weren't really connected. So there's this drive that we have in our family to be in connection. And
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, this is a way of healing
Yes.
the break that has
Yes.
always existed along the paternal line in my family,
Yes.
is in finding our way back home
Oh,
to actually
yes.
what our real family is and
Yes.
be in connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for us, this my family system, again being an organizational behavioralist, looking at
Yes.
system, my system was fractured, and trying to find a way back to reconnection of the system that we actually belong in, rather than the one that we were from.
Yes.
So it's very, very, very interesting in trying to see the healing that needs to happen within that family system, and why connections are so important
Important.
in my family,
Yeah.
because we didn't really have the paternal connection that we actually needed and felt and wanted that was missing, and
Mm-hmm.
why it's so critically important to us. It's so fascinating why my sons are so close to each other. Because they hold,
Yes.
and any fractures is like we don't like that. It doesn't feel right with us. We want to be
Yes.
back together.
Yes.
And that I think comes from not having the security and certainty that exists within a whole family system where the connections are true and
Mm-hmm.
right.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, wow. That is deep. That is deep. I now I think in one of your videos that you were actually you did online, I was listening to it, and you talked about listening to the wisdom of the body.
Mm-hmm.
I know this, I've just thrown it off, but i- i- if I don't ask you this question, it will just keep eating into me. You talk about listening to the wisdom of the body. So my question is, how do you listen to the wisdom of the body, and how does that translate for
Okay.
people who have no idea or cannot, designate as to what is going on?
So I am. So our bodies have over 7 trillion nerves in them. Okay,
Mhm.
and as such, and we have 8 different senses within us. We have senses. We know sight,
Not
hearing.
five.
We talk about five. We talk about which are sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Those are the ones we
Yeah.
know. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get the next 3 wrong. We have a vestibular sense, which is a sense of um, where we are in space.
Mm-hmm.
That's related to the hearing
Yes,
sense,
yes,
the
yes, yes,
gyroscope in
yes,
the ears,
yes.
where we are in space. We have the sense of interoception, which is the sense of what's happening
Happen
within our
within.
bodies.
Yeah.
And then we have the sense of, and this is the last one I can't remember, um, but it's to the sense of our bodies in relationship to each other, into itself, which is why you can, if you close your eyes, you can
Mm-hmm.
put your hands together.
Okay.
Um, that's the sense of the body in relationship to itself.
Okay.
But here's the most powerful part about all of this is that all of this sensing that we have and the nerves within our body help us to stay in contact with all of the data that our body pulls in.
Mm-hmm.
And our bodies are this amazing sensing, feeling, and emoting instrument, organism. That's
Mm-hmm.
why when babies are born, they have no language, but yet we know what they're trying to tell us because we're communicating on a sensory level with them, on an
Yeah.
emotional level with them,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to figure it out based on what's being emoted, what's being sensed, and what's being felt.
Yeah.
These are our strongest senses that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We know that communication, up to about 90% of all communication, is not the words,
Yeah.
it's nonverbal in terms of
It
how we
is.
communicate. How we,
Yes, it is. Body
so, what is
language.
that sense? Is that what's the communications being done? What are we getting? We're getting what our bodies are
Mm-hmm.
telling each other. We're getting
Mm-hmm.
the messaging that our bodies are communicating with one another. It's
Yeah.
why you can walk up to a person and have a sense that you know them having never met them.
I
Because,
know, eh?
yeah, it's a conversation that your body's having with that other body.
Yeah.
Um, and
Okay.
and that's why we can walk into a room and not necessarily feel comfortable in the room because it's the energy that our body is feeling in that place.
Let me
So
tell you this. I don't mean to cut you short, but
go ahead.
this thing that you're telling me. Earlier last year, I went to a Brantford Chamber of Commerce, a program. And as I walked in and sat in my chair, there was this woman sitting, an older, maybe about 72, 75-year old, sitting. As soon as I sat down, an older white woman, she just came across me and said, "Do you do sign reading?" she asked whether I did how do we call it, sign reading, fake palm reading, and all those other as they say woo woo stuff. And I said no. She said no, 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 no. When you were walking in, I looked at you. I could feel that you. So, and she was really serious that she thought I was lying to her, that she felt like I did that and I could tell her future and all those things. And it's like, I don't even know my future, what tomorrow brings. But she felt that, how do we call it? I could tell her that. So I
Mhm.
looked at her and I said, "You're an empath." She said,
Mm.
"Yes, I am." I said, "Okay, I'm also an empath." It's like,
Mm.
oh, okay, that settled it. But she was so serious at the table that apparently her eyes were glued to me from right from till I sat at the table. And so when I looked at it coming from this old man, it's like it gave me the chills. It
And that,
gave me the chills.
right, and that's what we feel is that our bodies are in fact able to sense and feel and emote things
Yeah.
that our brain may not be able to comprehend or understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
We get to know the wisdom of the body because our bodies are always it's always bringing in information and data, so much of it so that we can't process it all. So if we
Mm-hmm.
learn to begin to pay attention, to focus in on what's happening in our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
it will tell us things that we are ignoring often and help us to sense and understand things that may not make cognitive sense initially, but we may figure out later if we may figure out later. So it becomes really important to us that we begin to tune in, as I like to say, to what our body is sensing and what it's feeling. I do that through a practice called stillness practice, where we learn just very simply. We sit still, we close our eyes, and we tune in. This is very simple. It's a thousands of year old practice.
Mm-hmm.
But we learn to begin the process of tuning into what we're sensing and feeling in our bodies. And it isn't to give it a name. This is where this is different than, let's say, mindfulness meditation. In
Yes, I was
mindfulness,
about to ask you that.
yeah, because in mindfulness meditation, it is about necessarily, we might pay attention to what we're feeling in our body, but we'll always give it a name, such as I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling anxious, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling excited, or I'm feeling hot, or I'm feeling cold, or
Mm-hmm.
this feels painful. But
Mm-hmm.
it's when we actually identify what it is that we're sensing or feeling, is
Mm-hmm.
we lose the ability for it actually to be maybe something else. And one of the primary examples of that is, do I feel excited or am I feeling scared? Because
Oh.
they masquerade and show up often as the same bodily sensation. So it may not necessarily that I might be feeling scared, like if I have to do a presentation in
Mm-hmm.
front of a lot of people. And this is one that people talk about all the time. Am I feeling excited or am I feeling scared? Because that same butterfly feeling might
Yeah.
mask the same type of thing. So what is it I'm actually
Yes.
feeling? Well, just let it be. Let's not name it. Let's just let it be what it is. There's a sensation I'm feeling in my
Mm-hmm.
body. Who knows what it is? But I'm not going to name it. I'm just going to be in. I'm just going to experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
And as we are simply experiencing it and tuning into it,
Mm-hmm.
we have an opportunity to develop greater sensitivity, and that's what we're after, is developing greater
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity to what it is my body is sensing and feeling. And as we develop greater sensitivity to it, we have the ability to let it guide and lead us. We have the opportunity to let the body's wisdom begin the
Mm-hmm.
thing that we are able to dial into, to tune into, to allow to be. And in developing greater sensitivity to that, suddenly we walk into a situation and there's something odd about it.
Mm.
And now I'm able to tune into what my body's telling me. And instead of overriding it intellectually, cognitively, I am really dialed into what I'm sensing in this situation, and I back out of that room because of just what I said.
See, you back out, I'll go full frontal.
Right? So
No,
instead of going in, we back out because I don't override it anymore. I'm
ah,
tuning into what's happening here. My body is giving me wisdom here. It's telling me something that I need to be able to listen to and hear rather than overriding when I'm actually part of this now. So, through the practice I use called stillness practice, I develop greater sensitivity and a greater ability to tune into what my body's actually telling me and its wisdom and its sensory genius.
I wish I knew this before how do you call it? Because I'd walked into a room and I'd felt the energy was off.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, there's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, there was. And knowing me, I pulled the person aside, address it, don't cross me again,
Yeah.
and then come back to do what I need to do. So, but as I'm listening to you speaking, what if I had just stepped back, stepped out of it, and
Mm-hmm.
not said what I had said?
Mm-hmm.
What would have been the outcome?
Yeah. You never know.
I, I don't know. I don't know.
But I will say this, which is part of what you're saying in terms of stepping into the room and sensing that something was off and how it felt in your body.
Yes.
So when we develop greater sensitivity to what we're feeling in our body, we not only feel that, but it also creates the opposite opportunity, which is this. We were, can be, in better relationship to our natural world. So when we develop that type of sensitivity, when we step out into nature, we're able
Mm,
to bring in
mm,
all of that nature offers, and it's offering it to us through our senses, which settles us, help us
mm.
to helps us to feel more calm, helps us to feel more at home in our physicality. It resets. People have suggested the ability for us to, I don't know how much people believe in this, but people suggest that Earth, the energy of the earth is around 8 or so megahertz or something of that nature. And when we're out in nature, we have the chance to align to become in harmony with that wavelength. But we need to develop a greater degree of sensitivity to become really part of that experience of nature that's happening all around us. But if we're not tuned in to our bodies, we don't get a chance to take full advantage of what nature has to offer. It's called forest bathing often. So when we develop greater sensitivity, we're able to tune into all this stuff, take advantage of forest bathing, all that nature has to offer. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful way that we get a chance to be better humans, better stewards of our planet, better participants in the natural world, which is where we were meant to be. So
You're
there's a lot
just
of that.
validating my experiences from last year
Yeah.
when I went hiking
Mm-hmm.
through the Rocky Mountains. The water. I think at one point I have my shoes off
Mm-hmm.
and I was, walking on just like how I used to walk on the ground in Ghana. And it felt so
Grounding,
yes, grounded.
grounding,
Grounded.
because you were grounding, because that's what grounding is.
I felt like, and in Akan, I'm a Thursday born. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's Thursday. And the land is Thursday born. Asasiya. We refer to Mother Earth as Asasiya.
Mm-hmm.
The womb of the earth is a female, born on a Thursday.
All my
So,
children were born on Thursday, by the way.
hey.
I don't know what that means, but you're gonna tell me, and I'm gonna learn. You're telling me, and I'm learning.
Yes, yes, yes. So for me, also being a traditionalist and thin, I felt like I was home.
Mm,
I felt like I was home. So when I came back to Bradford, I continued with the hiking, And when I step out going, 2, 3 hours, I'm going. When I
Mm,
get to the Grand River, it's like I can sit and
mm,
I am home. So
mm.
you've just given, validation to what I was going through. And I'm looking forward to, like, next year, what am I doing and everything, getting my hiking boots on, because it just brings it all around. I feel whole. I feel like a human being. I feel less stressed.
Mhm.
I don't know whether it's making sense, but
It
yeah.
does. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Wow. Wow. Jeez.
Mhm.
Wow. This is something. But it for me, I always say it's just for me. So um for somebody who has a lot of things, who is thinking a lot with a lot of stresses and everything,
Mhm.
will will you suggest they do this stillness, go into stillness and realign
Yeah.
themselves, so to
Yeah.
speak? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Because sometimes for myself as well, there's a lot of noise in my head.
Yes. Which is, and the interesting thing is that there's an interesting, having noise in the head is fine. I
Hmm.
just have found that when you sit in stillness, even the noise in your head quiets and goes away. And then it's just
Oh,
not anymore. But noise in the head is the way that humans are. It's
yeah.
always noisy up there. There's always something happening up there. But we can, by stilling our bodies, quiet
Hmm.
the mind. The mind will
Yeah.
follow. The mind
Hmm.
will follow because the body is present in this moment. The mind is almost always in some future moment or some past moment. The
Hmm.
mind is usually rarely right here, right now. Our minds are right here, right now. Parts of our minds, most of our minds is right here, right now.
Hmm.
But for a lot of people, even being right here, right now, for some people, they wouldn't be able to do that. Their mind would be in part here, part there, part other places.
Yeah.
But when the body is present, we can ground in where the body is and bring the mind back to it, as opposed to having the mind someplace else. Which is the
Hmm.
beautiful thing about sitting still is that it enables us to bring this mind back to it rather than have it be someplace else. And when we are tuning in actively to what's happening in our bodies, then the mind will come back. It will be present here and it will quiet. It's one of the beautiful things about the practice of being still is that it stills the mind along with the body. Yeah. And it will.
This
Yeah.
is deep.
So here's an interesting thing too. You're Ghanaian. Part of our African traditions is really to understand and to be present, um, and to be still. And it has so much to do with the other world that is always present with us. Because in our African traditions and African spiritual traditions, I'm not telling you anything you do not know, but things that I've recently learned. And that is that the necessity is that in our stillness, in our quiet, we can live in better harmony with that other spiritual world that exists. Um, so we learn to be still, we learn to be quiet. It's not because we have nothing to say, but it helps us to live in harmony with both this physical world and that other spiritual world that is a part of the two. That's what I've learned. Is
Yeah, now that you're saying it, it's just bringing to mind, if it's during those periods of stillness, that in the past they used to say they are going to listen to the gods, or they are
Mhm.
going outside to whatever, whatever stuff that they used to do, that they leave the community and go away in search of, and they come with solutions, or herbs and whatnots to heal. But then also some tend to um, say they are going to commune with gods,
Mhm.
and that involves them isolating themselves in quiet spaces or whatnot. So when you were explaining this, I'm thinking, is that when they are in stillness that they are able to, you know, get whatever messages that I am not, but you know.
And you know, so it's an interesting thing because in my study of the practice of stillness, there were people who would actually suggest that that is actually true. That is exactly what is happening. That there is a moment, there's an opportunity when the body is still, that everything, that it's a very pointed moment of opportunity for there to be whatever that comes in that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a suggestion that many of the most world renowned geniuses
Yeah.
have gotten so much of what they knew or what they learned, or that was the critical piece of information. It came from literally the space in between sleep and consciousness where the body was
Mm,
still. It
mm-hmm,
was there that wisdom came, was there that information came, was there the
mm-hmm,
download came in that in that
mm-hmm,
in that space. But the
mm-hmm,
body was still in that space.
mm-hmm.
And it was through that being still and semi-conscious that stuff happened. So I don't know what it is that happens there. It's kind of woo-woo perhaps, but I do know this.
Yeah.
It works. This I know. It works. And there is really an opportunity in that moment where there is enlightenment that can come. There's downloads, there's information, there's connection, there's all these things that happen when things are still.
Mm-hmm.
It's this, um, and then I'll stop talking about it maybe, but you know, think of it. What happens when people stop and watch the wrong description. The moon come up. The moon doesn't come up. The Earth rotates
Yeah.
toward when the moon becomes visible. But
Mm-hmm.
there's this interesting moment as the moon. I'm gonna use it as the lamp behind me.
Mm-hmm.
As the Earth rotates, and where I'm standing here,
Yeah.
suddenly the moon becomes visible.
Yeah.
Humans across the globe do the same thing.
Right.
They will stop and they will watch. And there's this thing that happens in us, and I don't know the word for it, but it's like this magical, it's a magical moment where the human stops and focuses and is still in that moment. There's something that happens. When we want to have our most intimate and in depth conversations with another human, we're not busy doing things. We're
Yeah.
still
We
so
still
we can focus
and
and
listen.
not miss anything. We want to take it all in. Our senses are heightened, our focus is direct, our body is still, so we can take in what's happening. Um, you break a bone in your arm or anywhere in your body, you put a
Mm-hmm.
cast on it to
Mm-hmm.
immobilize the break, so
Mm-hmm.
the body can heal.
Yeah.
So the body's healing powers happen at the point of immobilization where
Listen.
that thing is still, so the body can be healed in that moment. When we are in the stillness, I like to say, of sleep, is when the brain cleans itself. So there's one pathway for nutrients to get into the brain. It's
Mm-hmm.
reversed when you're asleep at night, so that all of the beta amyloids and things that are produced that are the waste product of the brain actually
Mm-hmm.
doing its thing get cleaned out, which is why you need at least 7.5, 8 hours of sleep at night, so that the body can literally clean the brain, so that you
Mm-hmm.
can function without brain fog, with less sleep on average, 4 hours of sleep a night on average, your brain doesn't function well because you've
Mm-hmm.
not been able to experience the regenerative power of the stillness of sleep. So that's why these things that are related to being still and having our body be still are so important to us. I don't know fully how it operates. I don't profess to. I just know that I'm a practitioner and I know it
Yeah.
works. And the history of both yoga, meditation, Stoics talk about it. It's part of
Yes.
almost all of our religious traditions.
Yes.
Stillness and being still is really important for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we can practice it, the better we can be as humans.
Wow. There is a trend that I find that in North America, most especially those that have managed to find this, I'll say, secret to a healthier, happy life.
Mm.
practice this form of either yoga, stillness, or meditation or whatnot, and they live by it to create some form of balance in this chaos of how do we call it, North America. And
Right.
my thing is, for those of us who grew up in these systems, actually have thrown it away
Mm-hmm.
to live in the chaos, and the chaos is not doing us well.
No.
It is it is slowly, how do we call it, killing us. It is slowly killing us. So um like many parts of Ghana has, the city has become like a concrete jungle. Meanwhile,
Mm.
growing up, there were so many trees on the compound. You are climbing trees, you're plucking mangoes, or how do we call it, almond nuts or cashew nuts or whatever. But so much development, less green, artificial greenery, and we think development. This is what I'm realizing. Even the western part of the world are coming back to the roots which they
Mm.
left due to industrialization, because stillness is actually rooted in being one with nature and
Yes.
oneself,
Yeah.
and we are running away from it.
And there's so many moments that you talk about where in nature to be to participate in it requires being still in it. For
Mhm.
instance, you could be walking along as you've done, and you might stop by that stream that you stopped at, and it stopped you and
Mm,
made you be still in that moment to be able to take it all in
mm,
what you were participating with it, in it. You were part of it. You were no longer walking through it. You stopped to become part of it.
part of
And
it.
this is where stillness really helps us. You'll be walking along, you'll hear a bird, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
stop
Mm-hmm.
and you'll be still because you want to focus all of your faculties, all of your energies, all of your sensitivities, your
Mm-hmm.
nerves into the discerning of what it is
Mm-hmm.
that you want to hear and be a part of in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And you have to be still to do that. You go trumping through. You got to be still to do that. And part of our industrialization, you're very correct in pointing out. Part of our industrialization is the notion of productivity. Productivity is all about continuous action and activity. That's what
Mm-hmm.
productivity is, because productivity is tied to profitability,
Yeah.
and profitability is about making money. That's what we want to do. We want to make money because if you make money, you can get stuff. If you get stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
can be what? You can be happy. Yeah, it gets back to being happy, right? We can do all that stuff but just productivity. It's what it
Yeah.
all adds. But when you're still, when you're not moving, when you're being part of this natural world, quote, you can't be productive. But honestly, that's the industrialist perspective. But the human perspective is that you will, in fact, may not ever be as productive as you are in that moment or moments of being still, where you are tuning in to this world that you are a part of because of all the things that tuning in and becoming a welcome part of this world, all that it does for you, in you, and through you.
Mm-hmm.
So being still actually is some of the most productive things that we can do. I think Deepak Chopra says, or someone else might say, um, in not doing anything, being still, we're doing everything.
Everything. Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
very powerful statement.
Yeah.
But there's just something in us that enables us to be in a better place when we're
Mm-hmm.
particularly out in nature and still in it
Mm-hmm.
and letting us become part of it. It's a very powerful thing that you talked about in the compound, in nature, with so
Mm-hmm.
much that we can be a part of in it
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
still in it. Very
Wow.
powerful.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Lord have mercy. This has, I knew it was going to be powerful, but I didn't know it was going to be this powerful.
Very.
Hey,
Mm.
Mr. Eric Russell. Owen. Oh, the Owen is not there. This is so enlightening. I knew I wanted to talk to you so much about this stillness, but what you've done for me, and I hope those that are listening, is that to this, either watching it on YouTube or on the podcast on Spotify or Apple thing, is that they get a lot from, because this is packed.
Mm.
This is packed because we've talked about a lot, you know, learning. We've talked about learning. We've talked about, experiences and asking questions to learn and being open minded in the learning process, and also forming, how do you call it, connections. But
Mm.
let's say those are the outside ones. But for you to, for your inner growth of, can I say spiritual growth as well
Sure,
in stillness?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for your inner growth, your spiritual growth, practicing stillness, being in tune with
Mhm.
self and being one. I've just had the things that I was doing, that I was happy go lucky doing, validated for me. And it
Mhm.
feels so amazing that I wasn't insane because
No, no.
I wasn't crazy, but it's actually, something that is done. And actually, you teach it, something that you teach. I just thought I was just, doing my own thing, but it's something that actually people need it taught to them. So, and you validated that for me. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Mm. You're
So,
so very.
if people need to get through to you, where
Mhm.
can they get through to you? Your information.
You, you can find me on Instagram at Eric Owen Russell Coaching. You can find me on my website at www.ericowenrussell.com. Those are the major places where you find me. There, just look me up and just search me online. You can find me there.
Yeah.
So Eric Owen Russell, Russell, and you
Yes.
can find me there. Got a book coming out soon, so
I
it'll be
did
fun to get
ask
out there.
about that, eh? I'm ready to read it.
It's going to be terrific. It'll be a helpful guide to
Hmm.
get you through, to get anyone through their difficult, troubling moments of life. Because life is like a river. And life is very much like a river. It's like you're on a river and you're paddling along. And sometimes life is just a peaceful, calm paddle where you can get your boat any place you want it to. It's easy. Other times it's like a raging torrent of chaos where you think you're going to die. But that's the way life is. And the book will be to help provide a meaningful and important pathway with practical things that you can do, and especially things you need to know to get you through those difficult moments. And just last thing I'll say about that, just remember, getting through difficulty is 5 stages: reaction, then is realization, reconciliation, response, and then resolution. Those 5 steps will take you through difficulty. We all go through them, but
I
that
need
gets
to
you
read
from,
that book.
yeah, yeah, and it'll be out. It'll be out soon, and it'll just get you through the stages to get out the other side. Because one last part, difficulty is the teacher that helps you learn. Never run away from difficulty or hardship. It is where you learn. Critically important.
Because in my personal life, I've had to have um, difficult conversations with
Yeah.
women who have lost, you know,
Mm,
at any stage, six
yeah.
weeks, 19
Uh,
weeks,
uh,
30 something weeks. How do I have these conversations?
yeah.
And it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough having those conversations. And frankly, I don't know how I have those conversations, but I do have those conversations. Maybe because of experiences I've had.
Hmm.
Actually, let me tell you this. Some people who listen to my podcast may have heard it over and over. That is fine. My first experience with death was when I was a student in Ghana at Holy Child School. The girl died on me.
Mm,
Was sitting, we're taking her to hospital. We didn't even descend down the hill. The school was on top of it. She so actually challenged my belief in God. I told everybody, stop praying, she's dead.
mm,
But I also realized that that is the moment that also changed the trajectory of my life.
yeah.
to be in healthcare, do the things I do, and say the things I say is part, that experience as a teenager, a 16-year-old, is part of the person that I have become. So, but it's still difficult having that conversation with, families. So I will be really, really privileged to have a copy and read and,
I'll
get
let you
some
know.
of the steps to do that. The coaching through the book. Hey, I'm looking forward. Guys, this has been the Nanaya Yebwa Show with Eric Russell. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I will come back to you next time with some amazing and wonderful. And we'll come back again because we're waiting for the book to come out. I'm not even giving you a choice.
I'll be back then.
Most definitely.
Yeah, your expression.
This is the Nanaya Yabwa Show.